Today we're tackling everything you need to know about Xiao in Genshin Impact, from builds to weapons to artifacts, and especially how to get the most damage out of his skill set. This video is going to be more about the actual way of playing him and how all of those things interact. If you want all of the math behind the best builds for Xiao in Genshin, I'll have a link to that video as well with all the math details for you math nerds out there. So let's get into it. Now, first of all, Xiao, very powerful AoE damage character with his elemental burst activated, obviously, but what's the best way to get the most damage out of him? We're going to go over his damage combos first, and it's very simple, but there's one little thing you can add in the middle to help you out, especially if you have these weapons like the Primordial Jade Spear that gives you stacking damage, or if you're using that freeze build we talked about before with another character that has an action that procs on your normal attack like Shang Cho. So what you're going to be doing here is actually animation canceling after you use your plunge attack. Now you want to use the short plunges because you don't want to spend all the time in the air. It's better to actually do as much damage through multiple attacks as quickly as possible. So you're going to pop that elemental burst there, and then you're going to do this. And then after you land, you're going to do a short little normal attack and then come back up in the air again. So it's going to look something like this. You see he's getting that little normal attack off, and this is your main damage combo. Now you're going to use your E to get to other monsters quickly. That's pretty much what you're going to be using with Xiao, getting the most damage out of him with that little 1-2 punch combo. It's really not that hard to do. It's not that hard to time, honestly, especially if you just smash that little normal attack key, and just as soon as you get that nice little normal attack up, you go right back up in the air and come right back down, and you're going to use the elemental skill to quickly go to the next monster. So that's TLDR, the best way to play him. He does a lot of damage that way, high mobility. You're going to get that extra normal attack off in there, get that normal attack animation starting. And if you're using a character like we talked about, like Shang Cho, or anyone else that's a support character that gives you an extra attack, or they're doing extra damage based off of you executing a normal attack, you're going to be able to get that normal attack off and get that damage bonus up there faster. So weapon selection and artifact selection here. Artifact selection, your go-to, there's gonna be two different builds here, guys, that we talked about, especially in the last video, and showed off the differences. The go-to one is gonna be 2-piece Gladiator Finale and 2-piece Viridescent Inventor. This is because a lot of your damage is coming from that plunging attack. It's not coming from normal attacks and charge attacks. It's coming from plunging attacks, and then also on top of that, it's going to be coming from your elemental skill when you're going through different waves of monsters. They're moving from one enemy to the next enemy. In the 4-piece Gladiator's Finale, if you're wearing that, that's only going to affect your normal attack damage, not charge attack, not plunging attack, nothing of that nature. That's why you want the 2-piece Viridescent set. You don't want to go 4-piece Viridescent because that's the supportive option. It increases your swirl damage. You can't use the 4-piece to lower animal resistance. So you really want to go 2 and 2 here. That's going to be his main set. Now there is another set that you guys can use, and that's the Blizzard Strayer set, but we'll get more into that set later because you sort of need an entire team based around that set to work out, although it's really not that big of a deal. Main stats and substats on your artifact sets. Substats, you're looking for critical hit chance, critical hit damage, maybe a little attack percent, some energy recharge in there as well, because one of the main things about his elemental burst is that while he's in his elemental burst, his E actually isn't going to be generating any animal particles. Now you got that little pyro one there because we're in the little trial testing zone here, but his E during his elemental burst does not generate elemental particles whatsoever, so he's not going to be able to feed himself energy as easily as before. And so that also might be a playstyle thing that you need to take into consideration, maybe using your E's after your elemental burst is done. That's why we're using them only for mobility, as well as getting, you know, some teammates that are going to help facilitate that energy regeneration so you can get that elemental burst back up as fast as possible. You're going to be using an Animo Goblet 100% of the time, all the time. Animal Goblet, that's going to be fantastic for you there. The Sands, attack percent, main stat, Sands. And then the substats you're looking for, guys, is going to be critical hit chance, critical hit damage. Those are the two most important ones. You're going to want a little bit of energy recharge to help facilitate getting his elemental burst back up, because that's really when he's the complete version of himself. You need that burst up. That's where all of his damage comes from. If he's not in his burst, he's like half physical, half elemental. It's kind of a mess. So you really need that burst back up. You need that mask on. The other thing that you're going to want to have access to here is going to be your circlet. What circlet should I use? Should it be crit damage circlet? Should it be crit chance circlet? That is going to be dependent on what weapon that you are using and what build that you are using. So let's talk about that really quick. Be dependent on your weapon. So if you're using a weapon that's giving you crit rate right now and you're using the ×2 Animo ×2 Viridescent set, you have something like the Jade Spear, you have something like the Deathmatch, then your Circlet needs to be a crit damage main stat. Circlet, that's just going to give you the most damage. You're going to have a lot of crit rate. You're going to have crit rate from his ascensions, crit rate from your weapon. You're going to have some crit rate from your substats too. So you're going to be able to hit 50-60% crit rate relatively easily. That's the thing that he really gains the most out of, is facilitating that bonus crit damage to help him with that already easily accessed critical rate there. Now, if you're using something like the Blizzard Strayer set too, then no matter what weapon you're using, you're going to be going for a crit damage circlet as well. But if you're using the 2-piece Animo, 2-piece Viridescent set, and you don't have a weapon that's giving you crit rate, you're not using Deathmatch, you don't have the Battle Pass weapon, you don't have the Jade Spear, using some other weapon, then you're going to be using a crit rate circlet main stat. Crit rate circlet main stat. I want to make that very, very clear there. So what about this other set? What about this Blizzard Strayer set? What does that really look like? What does that entail? So we've seen it before, the Blizzard Strayer set. What is this going to really be giving you as a Xiao player? Now, obviously the 2-piece is not doing anything for you whatsoever. The crowd damage bonus 15% doesn't do anything at all. But what it does do is give you 20% crit rate up to 40% crit rate against a frozen target. And that 40% crit rate is by a mile way better than that paltry 18% attack and 15% animal damage. But you're going to have to facilitate a team around this. We've been using that word all day today, facilitate. But it's very, very, very powerful. Now, the 2 best characters to use in this team combination with the Blizzard Strayer set for Xiao is going to be number 1. We have our boy Kea here. Kea, his elemental burst is going to be awesome here. We have the Glacial Waltz. Glacial Waltz lasts 15 seconds, just as long as Xiao's elemental burst lasts. You're going to have this up the entire time during your burst form, and you're going to have these nice little Glacial Waltz crystals encircling you. I'm sure you've used K before. So anytime you're running into someone with your plunge attack, with your normal attack, with anything, whenever you come into contact with somebody, you're going to be applying cryo to them, and that is a big deal. The other character that you can utilize here as well is going to be our boy Shang Cho. Now, Shang Cho's elemental burst, guess what? It also lasts 15 seconds. So you have 3 different elemental bursts that all last 15 seconds, exact same duration. In the way that this one works is when you use a normal attack, it's going to trigger his Hydro Rain Cutter swords to come out, and they're going to inflict Hydro on the enemy that you are attacking, which is a pretty big deal because you can then swirl either the Hydro or the cryo around, and it won't take them off, but it will then apply it in an AoE. And then when you come down with Kea, you'll be able to freeze multiple enemies. It's very, very, very powerful. One of my friends is currently using this build right now. It's very good. On top of that, it's going to be healing you and preventing damage done to you while you have the Rain Cutter sword up on your Xiao. So it also facilitates the ability to make Xiao more survivable. It's going to heal him up a fair amount, and it's going to make it so if he does take some hits while he's dashing around the battlefield, he's going to be doing some good stuff there. But you are going to have to learn how to do that normal attack animation cancel to proc the sword, so you can swirl the sword and then you can jump up and plunge it again. So that's going to be very, very powerful. Constant refreezes over and over and over for the entire duration of your elemental burst. And then when your elemental burst wears off, this one's going to wear off, and it's going to heal you for every sword that you have. So very, very powerful combination of characters for you there. Now, some other very strong things that you can use for characters with Xiao are going to be certain characters that can actually lower the resistance of Animo, because you cannot use the Viridescent Venerer set to use and lower the resistance to that element. It's not possible, but there are some things here. So if you are out there and you have the C4 gene, while you're inside of a field, all enemies have 40% Animo resistant reduction. So if you do happen to have that somehow, then that can be very useful for you there as well. The other character that can facilitate this Animo resistance reduction is going to be Venci. His C2 can lower Animo resistance. Also, while they're in the air, it's going to be an additional 12%, so that's 24% Animo resistance right there. And then the Storm of Defiance's Constellation 6 will lower it by an additional 20% on top of that. That's very powerful. And then the final Animo character that can reduce Animo resistance is going to be, for right now, the C6 version of the Traveler. When you hit them with their elemental burst here, they're going to be lowering Animo resistance by 20%. So that's going to be very nice as well. Now, there is going to be a new one that is not an Animo character, but you can also use your boy C0 Zhongling, and that's going to be an amazing character for you guys to be using with him. That's because his Dominus Lapidus was just changed and buffed up. Basically, what's going to happen is going to have 150% elemental absorption damage and physical absorption damage. Now, speaking of the Viridescent build versus the Blizzard Strayer build, if you're using any of those characters we just mentioned, C6, Venti, C4 Jean, using the Traveler, using Zhongli in your team, you're really going to want to go for the two-piece Animo, two-piece Gladiator build, because you really want to be using Bennett with him no matter what. I know Bennett is used in every party, but the reason you want to use Bennett with your boy, we did this in the math video, is that it's very easy to get crit rate, crit damage, a little bit of attack percent, but you're not going to have an insane amount of attack on your boy Xiao without Bennett. Bennett is going to be an insanely high damage booster. The two things that are boosting your damage the most in team composition parties with that two-piece Venerer, two-piece Gladiator set is going to be the Animal Resistance down and then Bennett's huge attack buff. Those things go hand in hand with each other, and it's impossible to have Xiao in Bennett, in a Hydro character, in a Cryo character, and then your Animal Resistance character. So what you're going to have is your Animal Resistance character, Bennett, Xiao, and then one other character of your choice. Could be a supportive ass character for your team or anything of that nature, and that's going to help you out a ton there. Now, some final tidbits for playing this character. I'm sure if you have them, you figured it out by now, but if you swap out during your elemental burst, it's gone. You've wasted it. So you need to design that team that really gives him that self-sufficiency, and you can stay in Bane of Evil the full 15 seconds. In addition to that, you also are going to be gaining a stacking damage bonus the longer you stay in there. So you really, guys, need to be staying in Bane of Evil the entire time. Otherwise, you're just cutting your damage by a ton there. For constellations, though, C1's pretty good. It's going to give you an extra charge of your E, so you can do a little bit more damage with it. You can also get around the battlefield a little bit more often. And in addition to that, it's going to be the ability for you to have extra uses of this E to generate particles for himself when he's not in his elemental burst. So it's going to help you get your elemental burst back quite a bit faster there. The other ones that you have gain access to all the way up through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The only one that's really big is C1 here, in my opinion. The last one here is Yaksha Guardian, and this is Constellation 6, and this is going to be giving you extra charges of your E as well, but only during Bane of Evil. So if you need to get around the battlefield back and forth over and over and over and over, do more damage with your E, this one is also very nice. Although before then, the vast majority, and even after, the vast majority of your damage is coming from that plunging attack. So the best one by far, in my opinion, and also the easiest one to gain access to, is going to be C1. Extra energy recharge after your burst is over, more maneuverability around the battlefield, and a little bit extra damage. This one's very easy to pick up, and it's very nice in addition to the rest of his kit. Hopefully this gave you guys a good idea about how to play Xiao, as well as the builds that are good for him. If you want that more in-depth detailed information, we already have that video out for you. This was more of a TLDR, all about the character guide, the math video. I'll have that link down there for you as well. If you want to see more Genshin Impact content and coverage, this is the channel that we're going to be doing a lot of that on, obviously. So come in, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, guys.